Adding tolerances to CAD drawings. So when you're building your designs in CAD, the CAD model is designed with all of your nominal dimensions, and the computer software creates a representation that is exactly that dimension. So surfaces that are some distance apart are uniformly all that distance apart. Surfaces will be perfectly perpendicular or parallel or angled. And what we understand from how tolerances in manufacturing works in the real world is that's not actually how the real parts are. So where you have to add your tolerances into your designs is in the drawing. So when you're going from your CAD model in either assembly or part format, the dimensions that I've specified in here are the model dimensions, and they don't carry any variability or allowance for manufacturing or tolerance. They're just a digital representation of an ideal part. So when you're creating the drawing to communicate either to a shop or to manufacturing engineers or of how you're actually going to make these, this is where you're going to add your tolerances in. So if I pull the assembly drawing into here, I can do a couple different things. So one thing you may want to do is change the scale of the part. So if you click on the hash line around the drawing view, same thing as all the other features in SolidWorks, you get this pane on the left that allows you to manipulate that drawing. And I want to change the scale of it for one thing to make it a little bit easier to see and fill up a little bit more of the drawing. So go custom scale, and this is where you can choose how to enlarge or make the view smaller. So I like that one, and I'm gonna add a dimension of the overall length of this assembly. So I'm gonna pick these two lines and place my dimension. So same thing applies once the dimension is in there. If you click on the dimension, then you get an option pane for controlling the dimension shows up on the left. Since this part was drawn in millimeters, but my software is set up in inches, a convenient thing to do if you have multiples back and forth, or you're trying to show something that's nominally millimeters on an inch drawing. If you go down to the bottom and click dual dimension, it will add the millimeter dimension in parentheses. And in the drop down, there's some settings you can alter there if you wanted to change how that dual dimension was displayed. And then if you go back up to the top, there's a tolerancing and precision box for all of those for this dimension. So right now I'm editing only this one. Remember that in the drawing block, a lot of times there will be implicit dimensions marked out by the number of decimal places that the particular dimension will carry. So if you were going to change the number of digits of precision of that portion of the drawing, this is where you would do it in tolerance and precision. So I'm going to make this a 3-digit dimension instead of 4. And then for tolerance, when you pull down this menu, remember in the terminology, this is where you would select the different sorts of the different types of tolerance that you're going to use. So I'm going to, for the sake of argument on this one, I'm going to make it a bilateral tolerance, and I want the part to be no more than 5/1000ths of an inch larger and no more than 15/1000ths of an inch smaller. So when you key, not 15. So when you key those in, they show up next to your dimension. In the bottom box here, you can also do things like add notes that will show up for that dimension. The portions that show up in the carets are parts of the dimension that are linked to the master part. So that you want to be very careful if you start changing those. So you can override what this dimension displays to be something other than what the model shows. But for example, if I go back into my part, now that this drawing is open, it's showing 145 millimeter length for the total assembly. If I edit if I edit one of the parts to be 100 millimeters deep instead of 50 and rebuild the part and go back to my drawing, the dimension is linked to that part and represents how you change that, how you change the size of that part within the drawing without having to edit anything in the drawing. So it's usually a good idea to leave the dimensions tied to the features in the model. There's some really specific times that you might want to mess with that. So if you create a dimension and for some reason it's not tracking the part changing correctly, it's probably because something in this text box got edited in a strange way. Dimensions.